Hello everyone. You see, when we think of communication ending, we often imagine arguments, harsh words, or emotional confrontations. We expect fire, storms, chaos, but the truth is some of the most powerful endings come in absolute stillness, in the quiet exit, in silence. Her silence was not an accident. It was a decision. A conscious choice not to raise her voice, not to beg, not to fight for space in a room where she no longer felt heard. That silence wasn't empty. It was full. Full of everything she had tried to express, everything she had bottled up, everything she had once hoped he would understand. She wasn't trying to win. She wasn't trying to hurt. She was simply done. And that kind of silence, it doesn't shout, but it pierces. Because when a man hears it, really hears it, it echoes in his soul. It's not just the absence of her voice, it's the absence of her effort, her care, her presence, her warmth. And suddenly, everything he had gotten used to, the messages, the questions, the reminders, the laughter, it all goes still. No closure, no speech, just silence. That silence over time becomes a sound he cannot stop hearing. In quiet rooms, in sleepless nights, in songs that once meant nothing, it's everywhere, filling the places where words used to live. And it starts asking questions he can't answer. He wonders, why did she stop talking? Why did she stop trying? When did I lose her? Without even realizing it. He doesn't realize that her silence wasn't sudden. It was slow, it built up like pressure behind a dam. And when it finally burst, it wasn't loud, but it flooded everything. And that flood, it left him standing alone in his own thoughts. He remembers the sound of her voice, but even more than that, he remembers the moment it disappeared. Because silence stays, it doesn't fade. It lingers like perfume on clothes she left behind, like memories in places they once shared. And the thing about silence, it doesn't need volume to break you. It needs only absence, and that's what makes it unforgettable. Before the silence came, before the distance took over, before she withdrew into that haunting quiet, she tried. Oh, she tried. Not once, not twice, but in 1,000 quiet, invisible ways. Ways that didn't come with fireworks or breakdowns, but with subtle shifts that only a man who truly cared would have noticed. She didn't just wake up one day and decide to go silent. That silence was the final act, not the first. It was the result of countless moments where she gave more than she received, where she reached out and was met with a cold screen or distracted replies, where she shared parts of herself and was met with indifference, where her softness was mistaken for weakness, her patience abused. She tried through her words, through the late night talks, through the gentle "are you okay?" and the "I'm here if you want to talk." She tried through her texts, her time, her forgiveness. She tried to remind him what they had. She tried to make him see what he was risking. She tried to make him feel again, but he didn't hear her. He heard her voice, yes, but he didn't listen to her soul. He didn't notice how her messages became shorter, not because she was angry, but because she was tired. He didn't catch the way her good mornings became less enthusiastic. How the sparkle in her eyes dimmed when they talked. How the frequency of her calls dropped, not out of malice, but because she was slowly accepting what he was refusing to admit. And the most heartbreaking part, she was still holding on when she began to fade. She was hoping he'd notice, hoping he'd ask her what's wrong, hoping he'd say something that would remind her why she stayed this long in the first place. But he was too comfortable, too distracted, maybe too arrogant. He thought she would always be there, that she'd always explain, always wait, always forgive. He mistook her effort for obligation. He believed that her love meant she would never leave, no matter how silent she became inside. But love doesn't die in a moment. It dies slowly when someone keeps trying while the other keeps ignoring. And when she finally went quiet, it wasn't because she didn't love him anymore. It was because she was exhausted, drained, numb. And the scariest kind of silence is not the one that comes from anger. It's the one that comes from disappointment. Because disappointment doesn't raise its voice. It just stops speaking altogether. There's a dangerous thing that happens in relationships, not overnight, but over time. It's called comfort. And when comfort becomes complacency, it begins to rot everything it once protected. At first, he was attentive. He listened. He noticed the little things, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her dreams, the small way she liked to be held, the tone of her voice when she was hurt but trying to hide it. But slowly, he started sleeping. He stopped asking how her day was. He answered her messages hours later, sometimes not at all. He cancelled plans and expected her to understand. He assumed that just because she was still there, she always would be. He thought love meant she would tolerate anything, even his absence while he stood right in front of her. And you know what? She stayed. Not because she was weak, but because she still had hope. She still believed in the version of him that cared. She gave him the benefit of the doubt. She told herself, well, maybe he's just busy. Maybe he's stressed. Maybe if I love him harder, he'll remember how to love me back. He didn't. He kept taking. He took her good mornings as routine. He took her reminders, her check-ins, her warmth, all as expected. He stopped showing up emotionally, but kept receiving the fruits of her emotional labor. She became a constant, a fixture, a background presence, something that didn't require effort to maintain. He got comfortable with her loyalty, so much so that he began to believe she would always forgive, always wait, always be the one to reach out first. And then, silence. Not a fight, not a scream, not a dramatic ending. Just a pause that stretched too long, a phone that didn't ring, a message that never came. A voice he had gotten so used to hearing that he didn't notice it was missing until it was gone. That's when it hits, the silence. And it doesn't hit like a slap. It hits like a slow creeping realization that the comfort he built was false security, that he had something rare and he wasted it by assuming it would never leave. He thought her love was permanent, but even the strongest hearts have limits. And when silence arrives after comfort, it doesn't just feel empty. It feels wrong. It feels like something's missing that was always supposed to be there. Like walking into a familiar room and realizing the light doesn't turn on anymore. Because that's the thing about comfort. When you stop appreciating it, it starts fading. And by the time you realize how much it meant, you're already standing in the silence it left behind. There's a misconception many people hold, especially men, that the most painful departures are the loud ones, the screaming matches, the dramatic exits, the blocked numbers, the door slams. Those are the ones that seem memorable in the moment, but they're not the ones that haunt you in the long run. Because the truth is, the one who walks away in silence, without a scene, without a warning, without even a single word, leaves the deepest scar. Why? Because closure is a luxury that silence doesn't give. When someone lives in chaos, at least you know what went wrong. You might be hurt, even angry, but you have something to hold on to. An explanation, a final conversation, something that mocks the ending. But when she walked away in silence, she left no evidence, only absence. And that absence? It burns, because your mind doesn't let you rest. It starts trying to fill in the gaps. It replays every conversation. It reanalyzes every moment. It asks questions at 2 a.m. that have no answers. Was she hurting and I didn't see it? Did I push her too far? Did I miss the moment when she gave up on me? You begin to realize that the most damaging endings aren't the explosive ones. They're the ones that sneak out the back door while you weren't paying attention. The quiet exit is the one that leaves an echo, And that echo follows him into his next relationships, into his alone time, into his dreams. Because he was never prepared for the silence, he expected a fight, he expected a goodbye, but what he got was nothing, just a void. And what do you do with a void? You can't argue with it. You can't reason with it. You can't ask it to come back. You're just left with space and regret. A silent departure is not just a moment. It becomes a memory etched in confusion. A scar that looks like a question mark. Something that never fully heals because it never got the chance to bleed out in the open. It lingers. It whispers in moments of solitude. It reminds him not of how she left, but of how blind he was to the signs that she would, and he'll carry that scar not just on his heart, but in his behavior. It will shape how he treats the next person, how he listens, how he notices. It will be a constant reminder of what happens when you assume someone will never leave, until the moment they do without saying a single word. So many men misunderstand silence. They take it personally. They assume it's meant to punish, to manipulate, to spark guilt. They tell themselves, or she just wants me to chase her, or she's trying to make a point. But what they fail to see is this. She didn't go silent to hurt him. She went silent because that was the only way to heal herself. It wasn't an act of revenge. It wasn't a power play. It was survival. Because when a woman reaches a certain level of emotional exhaustion, after trying, explaining, hoping, and being dismissed over and over again, silence becomes her only refuge. Not because she wants to disappear, but because staying visible was destroying her. You have to understand, silence is not the first option. It's the last resort. Before she stopped speaking, she begged with her voice. She pleaded with her actions. She forgave what she should have walked away from. She overlooked things that pierced her spirit. She stayed longer than she should have, not because she was weak, but because she believed in him, in what they were, in what they could still be. But belief without response is a slow kind of death. And eventually, something inside her broke, not violently, but quietly. Like a candle running out of wax. She had nothing left to give, not even words. That silence wasn't cold, it was sacred. It was where she began to recover the parts of herself she had buried for him. The parts that used to love freely, speak boldly, love openly. The parts that had been dimmed to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to stay understandable. She didn't go silent to make him feel empty. She went silent because she was empty. And when someone has poured everything they have into a person who only took, eventually, the well runs dry. Silence for her was an act of reclaiming, a rebellion against the version of herself that stayed too long. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about her own peace, her own clarity, her own future. She wasn't punishing him. She was choosing herself. That silence, the one he hears now in the absence of her voice, is the sound of a woman finally turning inward, finally deciding that the weight she carried for two would no longer be her burden. Finally, understanding that healing doesn't always come in a therapist's office or a friend's advice. Sometimes, healing starts when you stop explaining your worth to someone who keeps questioning it. There's something haunting about the things left unsaid. When someone leaves after a fight, you have an ending to replay, a line to quote, a moment to blame. But when she goes silent, without an explanation, without a final word, she becomes a mystery, and that mystery is where regret builds its home. It's human nature to want answers, closure, a beginning, a middle, and a clean ending. But silence refuses that. It offers no final chapter, just blank pages. And that's what drives him mad. Not that she left, but that he doesn't know when or how he truly lost her. Was it the day he ignored her text? Was it when he rolled his eyes during a moment she was vulnerable? Was it when he forgot something? She said that mattered deeply to her, but not at all to him. He doesn't know. And that not knowing, that's what eats him alive, because silence creates space. And in that space, the mind does what the heart cannot. It starts building stories, filling in gaps, replaying moments with new meaning. The laughs that felt normal now seem like cover-ups. The smiles now feel like goodbyes she had already started practicing. And here's the truth. He didn't realize she was already packing up emotionally before she ever physically left. She was already detaching while still holding his hand, already letting go while he was still calling her in, and now he stares into the silence she left behind. And in that silence lives every question he never asked, every apology he never gave, every moment he took for granted thinking she'd always be around. He might see her online, maybe posting, maybe glowing, maybe looking freer than she ever did with him, but he won't message. Or maybe he will and get no reply. Because he knows that silence isn't just lack of sound. It's a wall, one he helped build brick by brick with his lack of attention, with his emotional distance, with his belief that her love was endless. And now that she's gone quiet, she's become everything he wishes he still understood. A mystery that can't be solved, a story without a conclusion, a chapter he can't stop rereading. And what does he find in every sentence he goes over again and again? Regret, deep, echoing regret. Because when she was loud with love, he was silent with effort. And now that she's silent, all he hears are the ghosts of what he could have done differently. And that mystery, her silence, her absence, her unfinished goodbye, will never leave him. It won't fade with time. It will just become part of him. The unanswered questions, the missed chances. The woman who became a whisper in his life and left him with a regret loud enough to last a lifetime. It's easy to say he misses, but what haunts him more, what stays with him long after she's gone, is not just who she was, it's who he could have been with her. You see, she didn't just love him for who he was, she loved him for who she saw inside him, the version of him that even he couldn't see yet, the one who was more grounded, more expressive, more attentive, more healed. She believed in that version. She spoke to him, even when the man standing in front of her hadn't caught up to that vision yet. That kind of belief is rare, powerful, transformative, but he didn't recognize it, not then. Because when she encouraged him, he thought she was just being supportive. When she challenged him, he thought she was being difficult. When she asked more from him, he thought she was being demanding. What he didn't realize at the time was that she wasn't trying to control him. She was trying to elevate him, to help him grow. She wasn't trying to fix him. She saw his raw potential and believed in it so fiercely, poured her energy into helping him become the man he was meant to be. But the truth is, growth feels uncomfortable, and he wasn't ready. He was addicted to comfort, to routine, to control. He resisted the mirror she held up to him, because in that mirror, he saw both his brilliance and his flaws. And facing those flaws felt like too much. So he dismissed her concerns. He shrugged off her hopes. And over time, he chipped away at the very belief system she had built around him, until eventually she had to let go. Not because she stopped seeing that man inside him, but because she realized he wasn't willing to become him. And now he remembers her not just as the one who walked away, not just as the one who went silent, but as the one who once saw something divine in him. He remembers the way her eyes lit up when he shared his dreams. He remembers the way she encouraged him when he doubted himself. He remembers how she fought for his greatness, even when he gave her reasons not to. But that version of him, the better, fuller, emotionally awakened man she believed he could be, was never born? Because she left before he grew into it. And now that version of himself exists only in memory. And that is perhaps the cruelest part of it all. He doesn't just mourn her. He mourns the man he never became while she was still trying to love him into his potential. Because when a woman believes in you before you believe in yourself, that's not just love. That's vision. That's a gift. And when you lose that, you don't just lose her. You lose the best version of you that ever had a chance to exist. They say time heals everything. But there are wounds that don't close with time. They deepen. There are silences that don't fade. They grow louder. Because the truth is, when she went silent, it didn't hit him all at once. Not immediately. Not fully. At first, it just felt like a quiet day. A missed call. An unanswered message. Maybe she was busy. Maybe she was giving him space. He convinced himself it was temporary. But time kept moving. And still, no reply, still no voice, still no presence, and slowly, the silence that he once brushed off began to wrap itself around his days. What started as a soft ache became a constant weight. Her absence turned from an occasional thought into a daily echo, subtle, then sharp, then unbearable. You see, silence has a strange way of multiplying over time. At first, you hear it only when things are quiet. At night, in stillness, in the space between distractions. As time passes, that silence begins to speak in places it never did before. In the middle of a song that reminds you of her laugh, in the scent of a stranger that brings back her perfume, in a moment of joy you instinctively want to share, but no longer can, in the way you check your phone, hoping for something you know will never come. The silence becomes a presence. A ghost that doesn't haunt with screams, but with stillness. A shadow that doesn't follow your feet, but your heart. And what makes it worse? You thought time would numb it. You thought the days would dilute it. You thought someone new might replace it. But it didn't. Because her silence wasn't just the absence of her voice. It was the absence of everything she brought into your life. Her care, her questions, her attention to details no one else noticed. Her instinct to sense when something was wrong, even when you said, I'm fine. And now, with every passing month, that silence doesn't shrink. It expands. It stretches into places where she should still be. Birthdays, milestones, holidays, lonely nights, moment nights. Moments you now realize were made for her, even though you didn't see it then. And the worst part, time doesn't give you answers. It gives you perspective. It makes you look back clearer than ever and see all the chances you had to show up, but didn't. All the signs she gave you that you ignored. All the love she offered that you received with half-closed hands. And suddenly you're not just remembering her. You're remembering who you were when she left. You're remembering what you didn't do. Time doesn't soften that. It sharpens it. Because silence over time doesn't become emptier. It becomes heavier, more defined, more real. Like a shape carved into your life that no one else can fill. No matter how much time passes or how many people come and go. Some women leave with noise. They slam doors. They write paragraphs. They scream until they're hoarse. And then there are others, the ones who leave in absolute silence. And that silence, it doesn't just end something. It defines it. It becomes a legacy. And for him, it becomes a lesson. Because silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's a declaration, a closing chapter, a boundary spoken in a language he never thought he'd need to understand. When she walked away without a word, she wasn't just done with the relationship. She was done explaining who she was, done reminding him of her worth, done lowering her voice to keep the peace, done begging him to meet her halfway, done shrinking herself so he could feel big. Her silence was her final statement. Not just about him, but about her. She had grown past the point of needing to be understood by someone who made her feel invisible. She realized that her energy was too sacred to keep spending on someone who didn't value it until it was gone. And so she left not with rage, but with resolve. And that choice, that brave, quiet walk away became her legacy in his life. Because now, whether he admits it or not, he carries her silence like a shadow. It follows him into conversations, into relationships, into the mirror. Because her silence didn't just disappear, it planted itself inside him as a reminder of what happens when presence is taken for granted. He may forget arguments, laughs, even intimate moments, but he will never forget that silence, that stillness, that moment when she stopped trying. That is the turning point. That is the memory that never leaves, and over time, that silence transforms into a mirror, a reflection of what he missed, what he failed to protect, and what he could have done differently. It teaches him things no words ever could, how to listen before it is too late, how to notice the little signs, how to appreciate consistency instead of expecting it. Because her silence wasn't just an exit, it was a lesson in presence. In awareness, in what happens when you love someone on autopilot, assuming they always stay. And now that lesson repeats itself. So, in the way he hesitates before answering someone new, in the way he pays more attention to tone, to timing, to energy, in the way he hears a song or walks into a place they once shared and finds himself standing in the middle of a memory. Silent, surrounded by echoes that only he can hear. Her silence became the space where his self-awareness was born. It carved into him a depth he never had before. It became the turning point between who he was and who he has to become. And that legacy, it's not loud, it doesn't announce itself. But it's there in everything he does now. Because sometimes the people who teach you the most are the ones who say the least in the end. So in the end, it wasn't the loud goodbye that left a mark. It wasn't the fights, the words, or the tears. It was the silence. The kind of silence that didn't ask for attention, but demanded reflection. The kind that didn't shout to be heard, but echoed loudest in its stillness. The kind that didn't break him, but woke him. And now, wherever he goes, no matter how much time passes, no matter who enters his life, he carries her silence like a lesson etched into his soul. A quiet reminder of the woman who didn't just walk away, she rose. She healed. And in doing so, she taught him more in her absence than he ever understood in her presence. Because men may forget many things, but they never forget the one who went silent first. Not because she vanished, but because in the stillness she left behind, he finally heard everything she was trying to say all along.